This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Community Behavioral Health.
Despite the many benefits, did you know that only 1.6% about of kids in the U.S. meditate, according to the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health? That's a shame, too, because studies are also showing that kids are dealing with higher levels of stress at a younger age.
Yeah, in fact, one survey suggests childhood stress symptoms could go largely unnoticed by parents. So we decided to tackle the subject of childhood stress. And for that, we've called in Dr. Suni Jani of Community Behavioral Health. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so before we get to childhood stress, let's talk a little bit about the piece we just watched. I imagine it doesn't surprise you that meditation works.
No, it doesn't surprise me that it works for some kids who experience a certain degree of stress, especially it kind of depends if they don't have any comorbid or co-occurring mental illnesses. So it really depends on the individual, what their personal strengths are and what their stresses are, and what kind of mindfulness they're using.
Are you seeing a lot of the effects of childhood stress?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I would say everyone I see is experiencing stress, and it's also important how we talk about stress, because stress is not only what all of us go through all the time on a day-to-day basis, it's how we use our personal characteristics and understanding of it to deal with it. So it's two steps. It's what we're going through and it's how we're dealing with it is our own personal experience of stress. And that's how children perceive it as well. So every single child is in school. A lot of children have after-school activities in some way, and every child understands and experiences them differently, and that's that child's individual experience of childhood stress. Some is pretty routine and some is a little bit more than they can tolerate.
Things are a lot different now for kids than they were before. Do you think maybe sometimes parents are misreading what they're seeing in their children?
Definitely.
Yeah.
That is very true. So some parents, when their children are experiencing stress, they come to me and they'll say, I think my kid just has a bad attitude. Sometimes they'll think it's puberty. And sometimes it could actually be a very serious mental illness, and it's just being written off as normal reaction to stress. So it's important we're able to talk about it and differentiate it.
Is there something we can do to help our children deal with this stress?
So this segment on mindfulness is very important. So it's good to be able to talk about things we can do in the home. I think first is to be able to understand what our child is experiencing as stress. So every kid has to go to school. So, and then there are things that every kid has to do, you know. So in every household, there's some expectation of chores, there's some expectation of behaviors, there's some expectation of relationships with other family members, getting along with siblings, doing homework, studying. There are things that every kid has to do that ultimately some will experience as more stressful than others, but they have to do. And it's going to be a little bit of a discussion about, okay, how do we schedule this, or how do we make this, or how do we introduce something that you find enjoyable into your day so that you have your let's stop and smell the flowers moment to make this feel a little bit less stressful to you, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's other parts where you might realize, you know, there are things that you have to do, and then maybe we've overscheduled you a little bit. Maybe you don't need to take 3 different types of dance classes. I mean, unless you love it. That's a different discussion. And if you do love it, how do we fit this in responsibly? So there's overscheduling. And then there's some normal parts of life that happen to people that are unpleasant. So sometimes parents separating, moving quite a bit, that's normal parts of people's lives, but that's stressful for kids who aren't used to dealing with new stressors the way adults are. So teaching kids how to deal with it in their own way, and things like mindfulness, things like relaxation techniques, learning new ways of restructuring their thoughts, starting therapy are helpful.
Okay, so as a parent, this is my child, I can handle this, I got this, it's okay. Is there a time I really need to come to grips with the fact that maybe I do need to check with a professional?
So that's usually when we see something like pervasive loss of functioning. So for kids, it's when you see patterns that are happening on a daily basis that affect their expected functioning for their age.
Okay.
So in the way a kid works is, okay, you know, they were maybe an A-B student and now I'm seeing C's and D's all the time. So what was kind of expected for my child is now not happening anymore. If there's a sense of their safety being affected in some way, you know, if they're not able to enjoy things they used to enjoy, these are sort of the warning signs where you go, I think I want to call a professional.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
No,
wrong. No.
absolutely
It's for your child,
not.
yeah.
All right, Dr. Johnny, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Community
It was glad to do
behavioral health.